gonna go ahead and get started. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started with our afternoon plenary. Feel free to continue eating. I highly recommend the carrot cake. It's really good. They asked me to start the plenary session with an introduction of Del Elliott. I first met Del, it was probably been about 3 or 4 Blueprints conferences ago, and I'm sure he doesn't remember who I was back then. But I was really amazed at his ability and his skill, and went up and said hi and thought that I had a major accomplishment in my life, because his work has always meant so much to me. And over the last 2 years, I've had the opportunity to get to know him very well. And the thing that I really like about Del Elliott is he is probably one of the nicest people I have ever met. His passion for his work and this work is probably only exceeded by his kindness for everybody. And so if you have an opportunity to talk to Del Elliott, don't think you're going to run into a big ego. What you're going to get is you're going to get kindness, thoughtfulness, and real sincerity. And so when they asked me to talk about Del Elliott and to introduce him, I don't have a bio, so I don't even know if he went to college. But I just wanted to share with you that how much he means to me in the partnership that we have developed between the Casey Foundation and and Blueprints, and about his commitment to really helping children and to really helping individuals who don't understand science, who have to implement it, understand it so that it can be implemented. Everything I know about evidence-based practice, I pretty much learned from Del Elliott. And so that means I'm always right. So, because I've learned from the best. And so I want to hope everybody can give a warm round of applause to Mr. Del Elliott. Thank you.
Thank you, Abel. That was a very kind introduction. This is a great opportunity for me to have a chance to talk to you about Blueprints in 2012. Because of the generosity of the Annie Casey Foundation funding us and allowing us to make some major expansions in what we're planning for 2012, I just wanted to take this chance at lunch to describe for you what's happening and what you can expect if you get on the Blueprint website, what you can expect from Blueprints in this year. So very basically, we're looking at a number of changes. Let's see if I can get this to work. There we go. Is this monitor on? Or could this monitor be put on? It's kind of hard to see from this side. Okay, so we're talking about expanding the outcomes that Blueprints is looking at with respect to evidence-based programs. So we're and appropriate, I think, with what Mr. Samuels talked about this morning, the expansion into a broader range of outcomes is an important advance, I think, with respect to what Blueprints is doing. So it's no longer Blueprints for violence prevention. It's Blueprints with respect to prevention for a wide range of health promoting and health compromising kinds of behaviors. And I'm going to give you some sense of what that is in a moment or two. Secondly, we are expanding the advisory board. Because of the expansion into new outcomes, it was essential for us that we add to our advisory board some new expertise. And so we have done that, and I'll take a moment to explain that to you later. And then we are upgrading the standard. And I want to offer an explanation for why I think that's important to do. So we'll look at that standard here in a moment. And then we have really made a major effort to create a new website, one which, first of all, gives you a lot more information so that it's possible to make a well-informed decision. So if you're a practitioner looking for a program, we believe this new website will give you the kinds of information that you really need to have in order to make an informed decision, and increase the friendliness of that website so that the navigation capabilities you have when you get on the website are going to be much better than they were before. We'll describe that for you a little bit. And then finally, we have a new Blueprint office. If you look back at that original slide there, you'll notice there that it's Blueprints in Boulder, Colorado, and in London, in the United Kingdom. So we now have a presence on the continent. So I want to go through and describe each of these new expansions that we're doing in conjunction with the Evidence to Success project that Abel runs out of the N.E. Casey Foundation. These two, we've kind of had a marriage between these two projects, and it's the combination of these two things which is allowing us to do a lot of what we're proposing to do. First of all, the expanded outcomes. So we are continuing to look at the full range of behaviors that we have looked at in the past. So under the avoiding problem behavior category, we're still looking at antisocial behavior, crime, violence, drug use, and child maltreatment, HIV/AIDS, truancy, risky sexual behavior, etc. So we're looking at a wide range of behavioral outcomes now that covers a much broader range than just looking at criminal behavior and violent behavior. We're now looking at educational skills and attainment. And specifically there, we're looking for some critical stages of developmental standards that we hope all of our children can achieve. So we're looking at grades, we're looking at high school graduation or dropout, we're looking at truancy, early cognitive development, being ready for school, employment, all of those kinds of outcomes as well. And then under emotional well-being, we're looking at a number of mental health outcomes. We're focusing specifically on depression, anxiety disorders, suicide, as the particular sets of mental health outcomes that we're looking at. And this is critical, I think, because we all know that these things often go together. When we're talking about violence and drugs and delinquency, we know that that goes along with a number of serious kinds of mental health disorders. And that allows us, I think, to more fully develop that set of outcomes that we're looking at. We're also looking at physical health, obesity, chronic health problems, a healthy birth, and a number of physical health outcomes. And then finally, we're looking at positive relationships. Specifically, we're looking at the relationships that our children and adolescents and young adults have with positive peers, with positive parents, and with positive adults. So we're looking at the development and the maintenance of those kinds of positive relationships. So there's an expanded set of outcomes. And I think that this gives us a lot of opportunities to expand the way we're thinking about violence and crime prevention to looking at a much wider range of outcomes, all of which, in fact, contribute to a healthy development of our children and of our adolescents. And this represents, I think, a much better picture of that whole process that we want to facilitate. In an effort to be able to address those additional skills, we've added 2 new members to the board, but I thought it would be important for you to see the members of this advisory board. I'm really proud of the advisory board we have. When we do a review of a program, this group of experts are tough. They look at the programs, they look at them with a great deal of rigor you get a really strong attention by all of these members to the quality of the program and whether the program meets the standard that we have for calling a program a blueprint program. So Steve Oates from the Washington State Institute for Public Policy, I don't know how many of you know of that work, but Steve is an economist and has done a lot of work looking at the benefit cost analysis of programs based upon a systematic meta-analysis of those programs. It's the best economic analysis of these programs that I've seen, and we're really privileged to have Steve on that board. Tom Cook from Northwestern University, probably the foremost expert on evaluation design and implementation in the country. Cook and Campbell was the classic methods book if you took a stats course or methods courses. So Tom Cook is a key member of our board. You can skip the next one. Francis Garner from the University of Oxford brings some additional expertise with respect to mental health outcomes, which we believe is important, and also it gives us representation from England on the board. Denise Gottfredson at the University of Maryland, probably best known for her work on the evaluations on school-based interventions. But Denise is a very skilled methodologist and is a person, I think, that really looks very, very carefully at all of the work that comes to the board. I count on Denise as being the most meticulous and having read everything and read it very carefully. David Hawkins from the University of Washington. David is probably best known for the Communities that Care intervention, which is one of the programs on the blueprint list. He wasn't present when we made that decision. But David brings a special kind of skill to this board, both with respect to his understanding and knowledge of developing programs that are effective kinds of programs, as well as for his excellent methodological and statistical skills. And we've added Bob Slavin from Johns Hopkins University. Bob is probably best known for the best evidence encyclopedia, the B program, which is another website which hosts programs out of the educational field that meet a high standard. So we're delighted to have Bob on our board, and he brings to us that expertise for the educational programs that we're now looking at. And Patrick Tolan from the University of Virginia. Pat is a clinician, also has developed programs, so he comes with the understanding about the development of programs as well as having good experience on evaluations. So if you have some issue with our evaluations, that's the group that makes the final decisions on all of these programs which we certify as being evidence-based programs. The new blueprint standard, we are in fact upgrading the standard for being a model or a promising blueprint program. And let me just provide some rationale for that, which is my own thinking. Number one, back when we started the Blueprint Initiative, the number of high-quality evaluations which were available of violence, drug, and delinquency prevention programs, antisocial behavior programs, was very sparse. There just weren't very many programs. And so when we look at the tension, which Mr. Samuels described earlier this morning, which is the critical issue, that the level you set for the standard does impact the number of programs that you're able to promote as being evidence-based programs. And that tension is an important tension that I think we all recognize. I personally would place greater priority on avoiding false positives than on false negatives. That is, the kind of cachet that we have built around the country on evidence-based programs is really important. So we're at the point now where in the Congress they're looking at requiring evidence-based programs for implementation under initiatives that they're proposing. It's become very widely established in understanding that evidence-based programs and practices are the way to go. And I would hate to lose and destroy that public confidence that we have by promoting programs prematurely, only to discover again that they don't work. And that means it's critical that we have a high standard. I'm not proposing, as ultimately I wish we could do, that the standard would involve a minimum of 10 randomized control trials with a meta-analysis showing the average effect size. That's where we need to go. Seriously, that's where we need to go before we start implementing programs on a national level. So I'm not proposing that, but I am proposing an upgrading of the standard. So I want to take a little bit of time to tell you about that so you know what that standard is. So we're looking at 4 different domains when we do a review. We're looking at the evaluation quality, and we're looking at the intervention impact. And those are the 2 issues, for the most part, that the board addresses and looks at very carefully. In addition to that, we also look at intervention specificity and system readiness. For the most part, the issue around specificity doesn't appear to be a criteria which is excluding very many programs. Most programs, as a matter of fact, do a fairly good job of describing the specificity of that program, what the risk and protective factors are that they're targeting, what that intervention is like, how they, in fact, get access to the clients or to the population that's the desired population for that program. These are characteristics of the program which need to be described so that somebody can understand what, in fact, is happening. Ideally, it would include a description of the logic model or the theoretical rationale for that program as well. We don't see that as a major obstacle. Most of the programs we look at, by the time you get to be evaluated with a high-quality quasi-experimental design or randomized control trial, is able to do that for us. The system readiness criteria is one that we struggled over some, but we have, in fact, decided that if a program isn't ready to distribute their program, that they're not going to be on the list. So that's a minimum standard which says that you have to have manuals, you have to have technical assistance, you have to have the capacity for training for that program. And so that's kind of a threshold effect that you need to meet that standard with respect to system readiness. We've also discovered that over the course of the last 10 years that we've been doing the blueprint work, that a number of the programs that we initially certified as being promising or model programs are no longer available. So LIFT, if you know that program, for example, developed by John Reed at the Oregon Social Learning Institute, that program is no longer available. Just recently, CASA-START decided to no longer distribute that program. So that's another aspect of readiness, and there are programs that are out there that were evaluated which simply are no longer available. So when you get on the blueprint list and you look at a program and you find a program, you can be assured that that program has at least a minimum capability for distributing that program and has the kinds of features that you need to know and have access to with respect to the TA manuals and that kind of material. So those are the 4 standards or the 4 domains that we look at. So here's the way the new standard works. Promising must meet all 4 standards. So we have a minimum standard on all 4. It requires 1 high-quality randomized control trial or 2 quasi-experimental studies of high quality. Now that's an upgrade from what was required before. It was required earlier that you have 1 high-quality quasi-experimental design, and that was sufficient to get on the promising list. It is no longer sufficient. You need 2 high-quality quasi-experimental design studies or 1 randomized controlled trial. There must be evidence, of course, of significant positive effects and no evidence of iatrogenic effects, that is, no harmful effects from that program. The model standard now involves mandatory randomized control trials. So again, you have to meet the minimum on all 4 domains. In addition to that, you have to have 2 quality randomized control trials or 1 quality randomized control trial and 1 quality quasi-experimental study. It is now the case that to be a model program, you must have a randomized control trial that meets the high quality condition. So when I say high quality, what I'm really saying is that this is an evaluation that meets all of the potential threats to internal validity. And that's a critical issue. So we look at every evaluation, we make a decision whether or not it meets that standard with respect to quality before we get into looking at its impact and summing across those kinds of studies. So this is a significant upgrade. We still require sustainability of the effect for 12 months or longer. So the criteria really involves high quality design, replication, and sustainability, and no harmful or iatrogenic effects. So that's essentially the standard that we're promoting. Just wanted to very briefly reaffirm, and I think probably most of you know this, that we are essentially following what's called the systematic review method, which is, in most cases, what is the recommended strategy. So I just wanted to run through and remind you that we do a systematic search of all of the journal publications that report on any of the outcomes now that we're looking at, systematically. This is a really nice thing at the University of Colorado and the Institute of Behavioral Sciences. We have a librarian who does this for us, who looks at all of the journals that comes out, finds any kinds of evaluations which are listed in those journals, and lets us know about those evaluations and gets copies of those articles or those reports. So we do a systematic search. You do not apply for consideration to the Blueprints project. People do, and that's fine. And when they do, we look at the materials that they have. But it's not necessary for you to apply because we do a systematic search of all of the published work around a given program. Secondly, we have very explicit, incidentally, we have 1,000 programs that we have reviewed. So we have reviewed a lot of programs. So in our database, we have a very, very large number of programs. About 80% of those programs have no credible evaluation. They are listed as programs. There's some brief description of the program, but for the most part, they have never been evaluated. That's really distressing to me because it suggests to me that the majority of interventions which are currently taking place in this country have no credible evaluation. We've made a lot of progress, but we still have a long ways to go. We do have an explicit set of eligibility criteria. That's the quality of the study. We select and review studies screened by those criteria. Our process actually involves 3 reviews. So there's an initial review, which is done by graduate students that we have trained that go through and write up the program according to a standard protocol that we use. That's the first review that takes place. A lot of studies never get past that stage. There's a second review, which is done by myself or Sharon Mahalik or Fred Pample. We are senior staff on the Blueprint project. That's the second review. It goes through a review with us. If we believe that it rises to the level of being a potential Blueprint program, then we then send that particular project, that particular program, up for a full review by the Blueprint board. So that's the process that goes on inside Blueprints that is involved in certifying a program. We review all screened studies. There are some lists that just look at 1 or 2 evaluations. They pick 1 or 2. We look at all of them. We do make a determination whether the study gets past the screen. If it does, then it goes into the review process. But we're looking at all of the studies. It's a quantitative review using pre-established guidelines and rules. We kind of went over that very briefly earlier. When it's possible, we like to see a meta-analysis. When there are enough studies that we can use that strategy, that is a preferred strategy. And we are, in fact, looking at and are considering, in a number of cases, good meta-analyses which have been done. And that's the best way to look at and synthesize the evidence across multiple studies. And then finally, we have a very detailed write-up and review of each of those programs and the decisions which were made and the justification for the decisions that were made. We typically send a letter out to the developer after the board review, outlining and describing that in brief. But that is also contained in the write-ups that we have on each program. So that's a quick overview of the process that we're going through. That's pretty much the process we've been going through from the beginning. Just wanted to remind you that we are going through that process. The new website is going to have a lot of new information on it. I thought it would be useful to just show you what a fact sheet this is probably one of the first things you would want to look at when you get on the website. This is what we propose to have on our fact sheets. First of all, of course, the program name and a brief description of that program. Then we will list the developmental outcomes or the behavioral outcomes that this program is targeting, what the specific risk and protective factors are that are being targeted, and whether or not there is evidence in the evaluation for change on the risk or protective factors, something which typically comes out of a meta-analysis, out of a mediating effects analysis, which tells us that in fact the outcome change was and can be attributed to changes in the risk or protective factors which were targeted for that particular intervention. There's contact information and somebody that you can contact to get information about the program and support for that program. The target population characteristics are clearly specified. This turns out to be a really important feature of what's going to be on the website. That is, what specific population was targeted, what do we know about the effectiveness of the intervention for specific population and for subgroups and subpopulations. And this turns out to be critical because if you are selecting a program, you need to know whether that program has proven effective for the kind of population that you intend to use this program for. We hope that this will give you that kind of information. There are a number of cases in which already you will see on the website under that description that this is proved to be effective with this type of population. It has also been found to not be effective with this kind of population. So there's a warning that this program should not probably be used with a particular population where the evidence suggests that it's not effective. And there are some studies that are effective for boys and not for girls, or for a particular racial ethnic group and not for others. The good thing is that that's rare, and that most of these model and promising programs that we have on our list are pretty robust with respect to the populations for which they have been demonstrated to be effective. That's the good news. But there are exceptions to that, and it's important that that be present and available for a person looking at a program, that information is readily available on our website. Program effectiveness, where we're talking about what the effect size is or the average effect size for this program, what you can expect. If you implement this program with fidelity, this is the size of the effect that you can expect. The target domains, whether this is a program which is targeting individuals, families, schools, or the community. The logic or theory model that's involved in this program. Program cost information. And this is difficult information to obtain in many cases. So there's a major effort, particularly with help from the Evidence to Success project, for getting good information about startup costs, about unit costs, depending upon the sample size that you're working with, the fidelity monitoring costs, other kinds of budgetary financial costs that are associated with implementing this program. And then we also propose to provide benefit cost information when that's available and when we are able to calculate that based upon the information we have about that program. Then there's a funding overview. There's financing sources, the places that you can go to look for funding for a given program. And that's a very wide review that turns out to be, I think, very, very helpful and beneficial if you're thinking about implementing a program. Is this a program that there are Medicaid funds for? Is this a program that you can fund with TANF? Well, what are the range of federal and state funding sources which are available that are funding this type of a program? So we hope to have that information available for every program on the website as well. And then finally, what kind of program materials are there that you can get and that you can review, and a list of references to the studies that have been done with respect to that particular program. So that's a quick overview of the kinds of information that are going to be available on the website, that when you get on the website and look and find the Blueprint program, this is the kind of information that's going to be available for that program. The new Blueprint website is a major expansion from what we've had in the past. A lot of the same material is going to be there. So that program matrix, if you get on our website and you're just looking up for a program that you've heard about, you want to know whether that program has been evaluated and what the evaluation shows, we'll still have that matrix we have now. So you can get on, you can look up any program or virtually any program. And you can see how that program has been rated by Blueprints and how it's been rated by other rating systems. And that can give you some idea for how a program looks across a number of different primarily web-based lists. In addition to that, however, we hope on this new website to have the ability, with respect to improved navigation, to be able to put programs side by side. So if you're thinking about two different possible programs, you can put them up side by side and look down that set of features that we just went through on the fact sheet and compare them, one against the other, with respect to all of those dimensions. In addition to that, you can search now on risk or protective factor. You can search by the outcome that's been proven to be effectively changed by this program. So the search capability is going to be much greater. And as you can see with the kind of information we have here about costs, about resources, I think that this is going to prove to be a really valuable resource for looking at what's available with respect to evidence-based programs now on a very broad range of outcomes that we hope will prove to be useful for you in all of the range of kinds of work that you are hoping to achieve some success in changing the lives of our children and families. And finally, the two Blueprint offices. We're still at the University of Colorado in the Center for the Study and Prevention of Violence, but we have a new office in London in connection with the Social Research Unit at Dartington. So we're expanding physically as well as with respect to all of these characteristics of the intervention. So that's a quick overview of what it is we hope to accomplish. We hope to have that website up by October of this year to be fully operational, so you can get on. In the meantime, you can still access our existing website, but the new website I'm really excited about because I think it's going to provide the kind of information that's going to be practically useful in making good, informed decisions. Okay, it looks like we're right at the closing time. I'd be happy to answer questions. If you have questions, please come on up after we're dismissed here. I'd be glad to try to answer those questions. I thought it was going to go quicker. I was a little longer-winded than I had hoped to be. I apologize for that. But if you have questions, please catch me. I would be glad to talk to you about any of those things.